tuning in. This is Wanderlust Hearts. Welcome to the podcast. So I had a request from a friend of mine. She is a flight attendant with the same airline that I work for, and we have known each other for a little over a year, I guess, a year and a half. She's Detroit based, so hey Karen, I'm going to go ahead and give you that shout out. I'm Orlando based, so I don't get to see her as often, but her and I actually went on a Africa safari together, and it was awesome. I'm going to do a whole different podcast about that later on, but Karen and I got to know each other pretty well on that trip, and we had a great time. So shortly after we got back from that trip, I was pregnant with my daughter, and that was something that we had talked about while we were on the trip, that was something that I wanted to do. And she always said, like, wow, like you actually went home and did it. Like you got pregnant almost immediately. And it was actually a really awesome experience. So now the tables have turned, and Karen is pregnant with her first daughter. They're having a girl, and she's naming her Rosie, which I think is absolutely stunning and cute. So shout out to little Rosie. But Karen has gone ahead and she messaged me. She said, girl, I love your podcast. It's awesome. I think you should do a whole segment about being a flight attendant. And, just share some of the travel stories and also some, tips and tricks for being pregnant, because there's a lot of flight attendants that now that has lifted, back in like the 40s, 50s, when aviation kind of first started, women couldn't be married. They couldn't have kids. They had to be young and beautiful. And there was just a lot of restrictions on your physical appearance, marital status, etc. And so now that that's lifted and we're able to get married and have families and things like that, a lot of flight attendants are getting pregnant or have had children and are navigating some different waters, having to be away from their children. So she's like, I think it would be great for you to cover some of those topics. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is kind of life as a flight attendant, also life as a mom as a flight attendant, and kind of the way that all transpires together. So the first thing that I want to say is that nothing will ever be more amazing than becoming a mom. And that was something that I have always wanted in my life. I knew that I always wanted to be a mom and have a child of my own, a little mini me, whether it was a boy or a girl. I got lucky because I've always wanted a girl. I got a girl, but I would have been okay with it, going the other way too if I would have had a boy. So I'm really excited. My daughter recently turned 1, so she's about 15 months now, 14 months. And it's just been an amazing experience. And so kind of to tie that back with my career, I will say that it is difficult to be a mom and a flight attendant who solely relies on a flight attendant income. As many of you probably think that flight attendants make all this money and they're gone all the time, and really that's not the case. Flight attendants do not make a great amount of money. If you look at the hourly rate of a flight attendant, I believe I'm at like $46 an hour or something like that, which sounds amazing. It sounds like I would be overwhelmingly rich. And I would have to be gone literally every day of the month for that to be true. At least for me, I don't like to be away from my daughter. I don't like to fly every single day. In fact, I only fly like 50 hours a month. Most flight attendants are flying anywhere from 80 hours to, let's say, 120 hours a month. And, compared to a regular 9-to-5 job where you're working 40 hours a week, 80 to 120 is actually quite a lot for a flight attendant. So you almost have to take that $46 and chop it in half, and that's basically what we're making per hour. I think understanding that flight attendants don't make exactly what they're, we're not making $46 an hour times 40 hours a week. We're doing that times 80 to 100 for the month. So as you can imagine, flight attendant salary is not great. When you first start out, you're probably looking at anywhere from like 23 to 30,000 depending on the airline. And then yes, it does go up. You could be lucky and work for Southwest, making $90 an hour top out. That's amazing. Because then they're getting like $45 an hour, times the regular, if you were to look at a 40-hour work week. So that's great. It depends on the airline. Every single one is different, and it all depends on your union contract, which is an entirely different ballpark right there. Now, I've been very fortunate. I also own a house cleaning business, and I've got the books, and I've got the podcast, and I've got, other streams of income that help me out where I don't have to fly all those hours. But for somebody who solely relies on a flight attendant income and, may or may not have a spouse that's contributing financially, I could see that would be very difficult because you're relying on your per diem, which means you're working trips. So if you're working a 2, 3, 4 day trip every single time that you go to work, you're spending that 4 days away from your family, your children, in this case, your baby. I don't think that I would have been able to do that if that were me. Now, I will say that a lot of people do it. It is doable. And, you are relying on any family or friends that you have that could help, take care of the baby while you're away. Um, and then, obviously, if you have a spouse that's involved or, understands the job itself and understands it, they're willing to let you go for that amount of time and that they're willing to kind of take the blunt of the work while you're away. And I will say that my husband, he is, I wouldn't say completely supportive of my job, but he understands my job and he understands that when I do want to go on a trip or something, that it is about the money. It is about making that extra per diem. To be honest, don't even know what our per diem rate is right now. It changes all the time. I want to say it's like $2.90 an hour or something like that. So that runs 24 hours from the minute that you sign in at the airport till the minute that 30 minutes actually after you get back from the trip. So it's running 24 hours. So if you're gone for a 4 day trip, you might be getting 76 hours of per diem. So all of that is non-taxed and adds up very quickly. So for people who do, let's say, 1, 3, or 4 day trip every single week, they are making a lot more money on their per diem. They may not necessarily fly that 120 hours, but they're definitely getting some of that non-taxed income, which really adds up. Now, for me personally, I have been with my airline for almost 8 years now, and I purposely waited to have children until I had that seniority so that I could kind of choose my schedule, that I could be home a little bit more often. And in this case, work turns, which means that you're home every single night. You just go somewhere and come right back. So being Orlando based, we do a lot of international flights. I like to do Guatemala, Honduras, Dominican Republic. Every now and then I'll do like a Salt Lake City domestic turn or something else that's domestic. Every now and then we'll do a Cancun turn, which doesn't really pay much. So it just kind of depends on the availability and your seniority. I like to do those day trips where I'm, up very early and I'm home very early, and that way I can get things done around my house before the kids come home and, just kind of have a little bit of balance there. However, I have found recently that I also like doing, a trip here or there just for a break, just to kind of turn it all off because being a mom, your hearing is just like focused in on your children. Like I constantly think my daughter is in her room crying when she's not. She's fast asleep. And it's just like that embedded, like you're constantly on edge, waiting for them to need something because that's your job is to be there for your child. And so it's nice when, we go visit the in-laws or my mom's here or his parents are here or whatever, where somebody else kind of takes that role over and you kind of turn it off and have a break. It's really amazing. And for me, I only get that when I know that I'm not responsible to hear, her, to be listening for her. And so being on a trip, I'm able to rest. In the aviation world, we call that slam clicking, which basically means you get to the hotel, you slam your door, you lock it, you don't come out till it's time to leave for the next flight. So yeah, that generally goes for people who, are older, who don't want to go out and party. I'm definitely not one to go out and party anymore. But, that's kind of, I'm not really into the whole exploring the new city thing anymore. I've kind of been there. I've seen it all. I've done it all. And so for me, it's more just about catching up on sleep or catching up on emails or some things that I need to do for business or for work or writing a book or whatever. And it's just nice because I can focus on that and not have a bunch of other, a bunch of other things that I have to attain to. I apologize if I'm like stuttering through what I'm saying. I will tell you, mom brain is a real thing. I wish somebody would have like kind of told me a little bit more about the extent of mom brain, but when I got pregnant, I had horrible like pregnancy brain, and I was like, I can't wait to have this baby so I can have my brain back. But I feel like ever since she was born, it's even worse. And the other day I was with my in-laws and we were all talking and I'm like, that brain, like it jumped out of my head. It got ran over by a Mack bus. And I meant to say Mack truck, but everybody thought that was hilarious because that just shows you how crazy the brain is. And I remember flying with a pilot. He told me that when his wife was pregnant, he was researching because her brain and everything was just, it was crazy for him. Like he's like, she was forgetting everything and it was kind of nuts. And I guess he researched that women actually lose 3% of their brain cells during their pregnancy or right after they have the baby. Like it's accumulation of a 3%. And I'm like, I think I've lost like 10 because it's crazy how different it is trying to articulate sentences or get the words out. Like you just literally have a brain fart 24/7. Okay, going back to what I was saying. So, as a flight attendant, being gone, just, doing turns where I'm home every single night has given me a lot of comfort in knowing that I'm still spending a lot of time with my daughter. She is in daycare. She started daycare, I want to say, at about 3 months old. And she's been in daycare this whole time. So we're talking just over a year roughly. And I love the daycare that she goes to. Shout out to Learning Experience in Oviedo. They're amazing. If you guys live in the Orlando area, they are fantastic. And I absolutely love them. I trust them with my daughter. I used to look at the app every 5 minutes to see what kind of updates they would give me on her. And now it's like I just look at it at the end of the day, look at the pictures, look at what they're doing, what supplies they need me to bring. But I'm not constantly checking the app anymore because I trust them. And I think that that's a huge part in looking for a good daycare. But that being said, whether I drop her off or my husband drops her off and then, whoever picks her up, him and we kind of just work that out. Hey, what time are you off work today? What time are you landing? What time, are you done today? And we just kind of coordinate that as the day goes by. So if my flight's delayed, he knows he's got to pick her up. And there's a little bit of flexibility there as well. His parents live about 2 hours away from us. So worst case scenario, if, something were to happen, they could easily be here, within 2 hours if we needed their help. And unfortunately, they are the closest help that we have. So I would say that a lot of flight attendants probably have family that live close to them, that are, having people that are helping them, that live closer or that are around, more frequently. Unfortunately, we don't have that. We just have each other. So we rely on each other quite a bit for all that stuff, and we've made it work, thus far. It's a lot easier now that my daughter's sleeping through the night. I will say that first year was hell. I will just say that. It was awful. She was getting up every 2 to 3 hours. Nothing was settling her. It was very hard to get her to go back down. Now she knows, like, it's time to sleep. Most of the time she sleeps through the night. If she wakes up, sometimes it's just for a diaper change and she goes right back to sleep. And then like clockwork at 6 a.m. on the dot, both kids are up. So it's an interesting, kind of way that they program, like just the children are programmed into a routine. And so my husband and I are in that routine as well, where we know we got to get up at 6 a.m. That's what time the kids are getting up. And we make it work. So being able to get enough sleep at night as a parent is rough enough for that first year. And any new mom, whether you're a flight attendant or not, that you're going to have, sleepless nights. Everybody's going to tell you that. But I will say that the biggest saving grace for us was when she started sleeping through the night. That changed everything about, how our household was operating, the attitude within our household. I didn't feel like I was walking around like a zombie all the time. My husband was more attentive, and we've been able to kind of work on our relationship as well. Not that it was bad or anything, but, you kind of put that on the back burner because you have a baby. So we've been able to kind of rekindle that too, which has helped our marriage. Now, one of the things that I will say helps a lot as a flight attendant is being able to FaceTime with my daughter when I am away. I've been trying to do, 3 or 4 day trip like once a month just to take a break. If I can get a Chicago or Milwaukee layover, that's where my family and friends are. So I like to go up there and visit with them. And just trying to do that once a month is great for me. Not only am I getting that paycheck, but I'm also able to see the people that I love and care about that I don't get to see all the time. And I'm getting paid to do it. Not that I need to get paid to do it, but it is definitely a bonus. And so, but, of course I miss my daughter. It is hard. The first few times to be away from her was very difficult. And I felt like I was constantly texting, like, how's she doing? What is she doing? How is she doing? What is she doing? Like every 5 minutes. And my husband's like, I got it. It's fine. Enjoy yourself. And now that I'm kind of used to it and she's, somewhat used to it, we're able to FaceTime. She loves FaceTiming. And it's great. Even though she doesn't talk yet, it's just great for her to see my face, to see that I'm okay, and obviously for me to see her face and that she's okay. And so that really, really, really helps too. So now I'm going to share some of my personal experiences as being a pregnant flight attendant. That was one of the questions that Karen had, was what was it like being a pregnant flight attendant? Now Karen is almost due. I don't even know when exactly she's due, but I know she's towards the end of it. So at this point, being a pregnant flight attendant, you kind of already know, for her anyway. But I will say that I did not gain a lot of weight as a flight attendant. I did not have to order a pregnancy dress. Most people didn't even know that I was pregnant. Our uniforms kind of hid it. I didn't even show really. So it was funny because a lot of the times people would be like, "You're pregnant?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so then it makes you think, like, do they just think I'm fat? Like, because I'm showing enough where I notice it, but apparently other people just think I'm fat. But that's fine, whatever. But I didn't gain a lot of weight with my daughter. So in that aspect, it was fine. I also did not have any type of morning sickness or motion sickness. So for the most part, being on the plane with the turbulence and stuff like that, it was fine. I didn't get sick. However, it did make me more aware of my surroundings. If there was turbulence, I sat down immediately. I always told my crew that I was pregnant and, hey, if there's going to be turbulence, I'm going to sit down. I'm not going to jeopardize, getting up and walking around or trying to answer a call bell, where I'm putting my baby at risk if I were to fall and get hurt. So that was a little bit different than it is normally, where I'm, the call bell, I'll get up and do whatever. It's not a problem with the turbulence. But for this sake, just in case I were to have fallen, I wanted to make sure that I was in a safe place and I was strapped into my jump seat. I will say that it was funny. My doctors obviously knew from the beginning that I was a flight attendant, and they basically told me, there really isn't any, deadline as far as when you have to stop flying. It's kind of just what you feel, and we're going to monitor, if there's anything that looks like maybe we need to put you on bed rest, then we're going to pull you from flying earlier. But in my case, there really wasn't anything that really they were going to remove me for. Now, I've always had high blood pressure. I had high blood pressure diagnosed to me when I was 21 years old. So that was something going into it. And especially I'm over 35, so I'm already a high risk. So, they were kind of monitoring those things. And they said that if the blood pressure was going to spike, I was going to have to, kind of get off the plane a little bit earlier than most people would. It was controlled. We had it controlled with medications. And eventually, I want to say it was like 20 weeks or so, one of my doctors asked me which airline I fly with. And when I told her the answer, she was like, "Yep, you're done." I know we're not supposed to talk about our airlines, so that's why I'm not saying the name. But, she knows that we deal with a little bit of a rougher crowd sometimes. And she was like, "You're done. I'm not going to, risk this." So, and especially being a high-risk pregnancy, you're going to do everything you can to make sure that this baby's okay and follow your doctor's orders, listen to what other flight attendants are telling you that have had children or are pregnant or have been through this or whatever. And, the great thing is that we have fantastic crews. I know I can say that for Orlando. The people that I fly with all the time. Every single one of them knew that I was pregnant. They were always very protective. They would tell me to go sit down if I wasn't feeling well for whatever reason. They always had my back. And so I'm sure that, Karen in this case has experienced like the same thing. I'm hoping that anybody who's listening to this that might be a flight attendant, I hope that you have had the same experience, that you've got crews that have your back, and that you're able to like take your seat when you feel unsafe to be up and moving around. Now, one of the questions that Karen had was, what do they do, the flight attendants, if they have to give birth in a different state? And that's an interesting question. So for me personally, I knew that I was not going to fly all the way up until I was ready to pop. Now, that is not going to be the case for every flight attendant. If you are a single parent or, that's your sole income where you literally have no choice, like you have to fly, you're probably flying very close to when you're due. And really, there is no medical reason that you would have to do otherwise. So yes, it is a possibility that if you're on a layover, you go into labor, maybe you're in a different state. I will say that our airline, we have fantastic insurance. You can go to any hospital. But a lot of women, they have a rapport with their doctor. They've seen the same one the whole time. They're more comfortable with their own. They want to go to the hospital that they planned on it. It's kind of a birth plan thing. Like, I know that I wouldn't have felt comfortable going to a place that I didn't expect to be going. And I was blessed enough where I did stop flying much sooner than most flight attendants probably do. And I was able to, have my own doctor and go to the hospital that I had planned to go to. Now, I would assume that if, you go into labor elsewhere, that you're immediately going to fly your spouse out there, and or any immediate family. And hopefully, though, you're not flying that close else where this is actually a concern. I know that there's also been, women who, not flight attendants that I know of, but passengers who have given birth in flight. They're trying to get back home to wherever their significant other is, or maybe their family, if it's, a single person who wants to be near their family, and they give birth on the plane, which I will tell you is my absolute biggest fear. I would rather evacuate an aircraft than deliver a child on an aircraft, or be the flight attendant that's helping to this woman to have a baby. That would absolutely be mortifying for me, because I would hate myself if something went wrong. Knowing that I'm doing my job, and that is something that we go over in flight attendant training is how to deliver a baby, but it's really vague. It's not, we're not doctors, and I would not know what to do if something went wrong. So that is something that I don't want to do. I would feel much more comfortable evacuating an aircraft than I would delivering a baby. So for the sake of any flight attendant, I would hope that you are grounded enough, you're not in a different city, but if you are, if you know that you're going to be traveling to these places, obviously you want to have a plan. Hey, if I were to go into labor, how far is the hospital from where the hotel is? You would kind of plan accordingly, I would assume. That's what I would do. I would, kind of know what hospital I'd be going to. I'd make sure that my significant other had phone numbers for these places in case I was taken there. And, I would make sure that they have my location, on my cell phone, and just kind of make sure that you have a plan if and when that were to happen if you were away on a trip. So I will say one of the funniest things about being a flight attendant when you're pregnant, any woman when you're pregnant, all of your senses are heightened. So your sense of smell is heightened, your sense of taste is heightened, and certain things trigger you, or they're more desirable, or whatever. It's different for every person. So I will say for me, I was very in tune with smells. Just everything it was amplified. And as we all know, the aircraft lavatories are absolutely disgusting. And so if you're the flight attendant that's flying near a bathroom, particularly in this case, the back of the plane, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. And so people go back there and do their business, and then you have to sit there. And most of our jump seats are right near the doors to these bathrooms. And so if you're sitting there and you're trying to eat your lunch and all you're smelling is the whiff of that every time someone opens the door, imagine what that's like when you're pregnant. You're getting this amplified poop smell coming out of this lavatory, and you're trying to eat your food. I mean, that makes you almost throw up. And I will say that I never actually did throw up, but I will say that I was close a few times, just because the amplified smell is just absolutely the most worst part of being a flight attendant. In addition, when you're sensitive to certain types of smells or even tastes, if you've got something for lunch that isn't sitting right with you, it's hard to be nauseous when you're on a plane, because there's not a lot of space for you to relieve that. And then the smell of that in a confined space is also awful. So I will say that the nausea and stuff like that goes along with being a flight attendant, whether it's from smells being amplified or taste being amplified, or if it's just, motion sickness or morning sickness, all of that is very difficult as a flight attendant, especially if you are triggered with like turbulence and things like that. So then you've got turbulence, you've got the smells, maybe you're trying to eat, but you can't. And it's awful. So going back to some more of Karen's questions, another one was it hard to leave your baby for the first time going back to work, and how long did you go to work for? I will say that even if you're doing a 4-hour Cancun turn, it is still difficult to leave your baby for the first time. In most cases, in this situation, you have not yet been away from your child. And I went back to work, I want to say 2 months after, maybe even a month and a half after I gave birth, and just to do turns. And so I was still home at night, so that made it a lot easier than being away overnight. The first time I did a trip where I was fully away from her for I think it was a 3-day trip, was the first one. And that was hard. That was very difficult to be away from her. And it doesn't necessarily get easier, because you're still wondering how they're doing, and is he taking care of her the proper way? And you just have to kind of trust your spouse or whoever it is that's watching your child at that point. And hopefully, you're leaving them with someone that you completely trust, and that they're going to take care of them, that their well-being is taken care of. So knowing that you are trusting this person is going to make all the difference. I'm not going to say that it's difficult or that it's not difficult, because it is difficult regardless to leave your child. And that's whether you go back to work in 2 months or 6 months or a year or whatever, it's still going to be difficult because it's the first time. But once you get past that and you establish a routine, like I said before, I FaceTime with my daughter when I'm away. That gives me some peace of mind. I also see her daycare pictures and stuff like that. So I know she's having a good time at daycare, and she's having a good time at home. And that gives me comfort knowing that she's okay. I'm able to see that she's okay. So Karen's next question was actually pretty funny, and I'm kind of wanted to save this one for last. So her question was, do flight attendants who are full time normally trust their husbands to leave the baby with when they're gone? And I think that that's funny, because when I first met my husband, I obviously was a flight attendant already, but I already had a lot of seniority when we first met. So I was already doing turns where I was home every night. So we were able to have kind of a quote unquote normal dating life. Prior to this relationship, everybody that I dated, it was difficult because you're gone all the time. You're gone for 4 days, maybe you're home for 2. And as a flight attendant, our time is very valuable when we're home, because sometimes we just want to relax. We don't want to do anything. We want a home cooked meal because we just ate out for 4 days. And depending on the circumstances, you just kind of you want your time, just time to be away from people. And I'm lucky and fortunate that he met me when I already had the seniority for that to be a little bit easier. Now that I have my daughter, and I have him and everything, and I asked him about doing some trips, because in the grand scheme, if you were to look at a monthly calendar as a flight attendant, most flight attendants who work trips actually have more time with their family than people who would work a 9 to 5, 40-hour a week job. So, like I had mentioned before, yes, you might be gone for 4 days, but then you're home for 3. And there are 3 full days. So if your child isn't in daycare, that's 24 hours per day that you are still home with your child, which is more than a 9 to 5 where you've got to take them to work or take them to daycare somewhere in the morning, and then you're only going to have a couple hours with them before bedtime. So I feel like on the days that I'm not working, specifically in this case trips, I have a lot more time with my daughter. But she loves going to daycare, so I don't keep her home. Sometimes I just like to get stuff done around the house, and she goes to daycare, and I might pick her up early or take her a little bit later. But the great part about it is that, she's already in that routine. And she already knows, what school is like. We don't have the separation anxiety thing because she started so early, and so we kind of bypass that. Now, in terms of my husband, I would say that was harder on our relationship, simply for the fact that he was used to me being home every night. So our dating life already had me being home every night. So once our relationship evolved to where we were seeing each other, every day or almost every day, spending the weekends together, nothing changed after the baby came. And so now that I've kind of asked him to do some trips, that's caused a little bit of tension, because he thinks that I need to run away to get a little bit of a break, which is not the case. Like I said before, it's just something to turn your brain off. You're to turn it all off. Like, you don't have to listen for the baby because she's not there. And so it's different, and it's hard for him to understand that. And we've discussed it, and I think now that we've done it a few times where he's been home with the baby, it's been okay. Like, he knows what to do, and a lot of the times it's easier if it's, while she's at daycare, because then, she's already in that routine of getting up in the morning, what that's like, going to daycare, coming home, having dinner, bath time, etc. We have that routine down for the middle of the week. So when I'm gone on the weekends, that's a little bit different, because now he's with her all day and doesn't get a break from that. So I try to discuss that with him, what days are going to be best for me to go, and what days are, what do you have going on this week? Is it feasible for me to go on a 3 or 4 day trip? Now, in terms of trusting him, I absolutely trust him with my daughter. Back when she was on formula, and we had to, we had all different sorts of things because she was lactose intolerant. I would always write down for him, this is how much formula, this is the the water to formula ratio, or this is what types of food she's eating, or this is how much she needs to eat. So I would write it down for him if something had changed. That way he knew exactly what he needed to do to take care of her if things had changed. So, in that light, basically it comes down to the communication between both parents. And, there was times where he would say, hey, she's not looking right. She doesn't look like she's feeling good. Maybe something that I didn't notice. So we were able to, like with ear infections and stuff like that. And she did have RSV at one point, which was awful. And so, we just kind of took care of it. I will say that as a flight attendant, my job is a lot more flexible to take time off. We're able to just go in the system and drop a trip if we want to. And so if she's not feeling good, I'm able to stay home with her. Whereas, he works a 9 to 5 office job and, he doesn't have the flexibility all the time to be able to stay home with sick kids. So that's kind of where the silver lining comes in with our jobs. He makes a lot more money than I do, but he's got more structure. He has to be present at his job. Not that I don't have to be present, but my job has a little bit more flexibility. I'm not in a supervised position. I'm not somebody that people are depending on. Like there's other flight attendants that can easily do the trips, that want to do the trips, that want the hours. So, if you need to make those adjustments in your schedule, that gives a lot of flexibility. And again, that comes with seniority. And again, that's why I waited till I had a good amount of seniority to have children, was because I wanted that flexibility to be able to be home with my daughter as much as I could. And that way, I could just do a couple of trips and call it a day. I don't need to work, 25 days a month just to make ends meet. So it really depends on your financial situation, what your partner's bringing in. But in terms of just taking care of the baby, you just have to communicate what it is that the baby needs. If you're breastfeeding and you're pumping, obviously you're going to want to give instructions on how to do that for your partner so that they can, heat the bottle up properly, the milk properly, and have that ready for the baby. Again, communication. That's the main thing here. Being a flight attendant is something that it's very hard to put into words, but it becomes a part of who you are as a person. It becomes more of a trait, a personality trait. It becomes a livelihood, a lifestyle. And I will say that the first airline that I worked for, which was American back in the day, I had a very different quality of life than I do at the airline that I'm at now. And I did not have good seniority back then. I was still on reserve, which means I'm on call all the time. I would never recommend for a reserve flight attendant to try to get pregnant, having planned that as a reserve flight attendant, because you're on call all the time. You could be gone for 6 days at a time. And that would be absolutely brutal as a flight attendant, in my opinion. Whereas if you have the seniority where you can bid, 2-day trips, 3-day trips, 4-day trips, whatever works best for you and your partner, then having that flexibility and that seniority is everything. Now, that being said, when I left American, I left because I wanted to focus on growing my house cleaning business, and I was out of the aviation world for about 5 years. In that time, I grew my company. I've created a passive income for myself, and that enabled me to go back into aviation because that's where my passion is. And I love, not only having the travel benefits, but I love, I still get the rush when I go to the airport, even 8 years in here. I still get the rush getting on a plane. I still get that giddy feeling, when I go to the airport. And, sure, there's days where it's not great, like you have a rowdy passenger, or maybe you don't get along with your crew, or there's delays or whatever. We all have bad days when we go to work, but in the overall sense, like, I absolutely love what I do as a flight attendant. I love my job. I love the people I work with for the most part. And the destinations that we fly, they're actually really awesome. And so for layovers and stuff like that, like, I'll look at that very closely. If I am going to go on a trip, I want to have a good layover because I want to rest. And so that's something that I've always enjoyed, and I missed that when I was gone for that 5 years. It was like there was a void. Something was missing. So my biggest advice would be, if you are a flight attendant who is pregnant or just had a baby or is planning to have a baby, don't leave the airline industry unless you know 100% that it's not for you, because seniority is everything with this business. And if you're a flight attendant, you already know that. And leaving an airline job just because you become a parent, in my opinion, I think is awful. You're better to just drop down, fly a little bit less if you're going to find another job, but keep it, because in the back end of things, you're going to miss it, because it does become part of who you are. Even if you only do this for a short time, And I know that I can't speak for everybody because I know there are people who've left aviation that don't miss it. But I just don't think that I would be me without being a flight attendant because that's just part of who I am as a person. One of the things that Karen mentioned to me, just in terms of flight attendant stories, being pregnant, was that she feels that people are much nicer to you because you're pregnant. And I will absolutely say that that's true. Um, I still, to this day, even though my daughter's over a year, I still blame, that scatterbrain, that mom brain, that pregnancy brain. I still blame all of that. I still use it. I'm like, hey, I had a baby a year ago, but the mom brain thing is real. And people will laugh, but like if I forgot what they ordered to drink, or if I forgot, to bring them a refill on coffee, or if the pilots needed something and I forgot, I'm like, hey man, mom brain. And they just laugh and they're like, most of them get it. For people like when I was pregnant on the plane actively, if they needed help with bags and I couldn't lift it because I'm pregnant, I would just say, I'm sorry, but I'm pregnant. And a lot of the times, they were very understanding of that. Whereas, when you're not pregnant, they're like, well, you need to put my bag up. That's your job. And so we would hear that all the time. And so that's another thing that was kind of nice. People, especially if you're one that's showing and they can visibly see that you're pregnant, sometimes they'll ask you, how's it going? How are you feeling? And they're a little more compassionate towards you as a person, which is kind of nice. Like I said, I wasn't really showing, so for me, it was more of me telling them that I was pregnant. So if I saw a mom that had a newborn on board, or a couple that just couldn't get the baby to stop crying, or whatever the case is, I'm always more compassionate towards those individuals, towards those parents, towards those babies, because there's nothing that you can do when your baby's crying on the aircraft. Most of the time it's going to be the pressure to their ears. Sometimes it's, they don't want to put their seatbelt on for the kids that are toddlers. You just have to get down at their level and talk to them. And so sometimes, coming from a more authoritative position as a flight attendant, I would just go over to these toddlers and be like, hey man, let's buckle our seat. We're headed, to Orlando, or we're headed wherever we're going. And, this plane's going to land really hard. It's going to land fast, or it's going to take off fast. And so we want you to be safe. You wear your seatbelt in the car, so let's wear our seatbelt on the plane. And so a lot of the times it's just learning how to talk to them at their level so that they understand what it is that you're telling them. But in terms of a baby, an infant, crying and stuff like that, like, people need to be more compassionate about that. Parents that are traveling with young children, a lot of the times, they're going to see their family that have not yet met the child, or they're coming home from doing so. And those are happy memories for this baby. The baby's getting to have pictures with these people as an infant. And that's really special. It's really important. And even though it's their first plane and they're not going to remember it, we try to make those memories special for them too. We try to, let's, bring them up front. Let's have a picture with the pilots in the flight deck. And, those are things that I like to offer to people. Hey, do you want to get a picture up front with the baby? Because those are things that later you can show them, and it's going to be memorable and something that they're going to keep and hold on to forever. The first time that I flew with my daughter, I want to say she was a month old, maybe 3 weeks old. I mean, she was young, and we took her to Illinois to visit my family. And no, I take that back. She was about 3 months old, and we took her up there for Christmas, and it was awesome. Going there for her first flight, because she was pretty much sleeping the entire time, and it was great. And she was so tiny that it was easy for my husband and I to just kind of take turns holding her. She was a lap child, so she didn't have her own seat, and it just made that really easy. I will say that going through security with a baby is difficult too, because if you have formula, whether it's breast milk or if it's powder that's already mixed with water, there's that whole 3-ounce rule doesn't apply to you at that point. But they will pull your bag and they will swab it to make sure that it's not an explosive or containing an explosive, that type of thing, obviously for TSA measures, and I get the security of that. But plan on extra time going through security, because they're going to pull the diaper bag. They're going to pull any luggage that you have that has formula in it or milk, just to kind of scan through some of those things, as well as, diaper rash cream or anything else that you might need for the baby that's liquid or gel or lotions, stuff like that. But you can bring those items and they will, again, just go through your bag. But it is what it is. Just plan accordingly. Now, when my daughter was, I want to say 6 months old, maybe 7 months old, her and I took a solo trip to Tennessee to see my best friend. we decided to fly, and it was just for a quick weekend trip. And I got a rental car, so I had to bring the base for her car seat. I had to bring the car seat, which I'm fortunate enough also clips into the stroller. So I have kind of like a 3-in-1 where the base stays in the car, the whole car seat comes out, and then you can put it on top of the stroller, which I think is the best invention ever. That's the one that I would recommend for any flight attendant. Um, Not only that, but it just makes going through the airport much easier too. So I basically set the stroller up. I put the base of the car seat that was going to go in the car on the bottom. I have a backpack type diaper bag, so that was on my back, and I packed all of her things and my things in one bag that was going to get checked. So everything was in that except for the stuff that was in the diaper bag. So anything that she was going to need during the flight, I had bottles made up already for her. So again, yes, we were stopped at TSA, but I didn't have to worry about lugging a suitcase and a stroller when I was traveling by myself. So that made that a little bit easier. And then when we got on the plane, she was also a lap child at that point. So I just gate checked the stroller and the car seat base. And then I just walked on board with her and my purse and the diaper bag, and that was it. And it made it very simple. Again, this was just for a weekend, so I don't know what that would look like if I was going somewhere for a week or 2 weeks, but we do plan to do a lot of traveling back and forth to Illinois to see my family, and a lot of that obviously is on a plane, and then to Tennessee to see my best friend. We try to go often, so we've been there twice, one time driving, one time flying. And I would just say that, packing smart is very important. Roll your clothes, make sure that you've got enough room for everything, that you're bringing everything that you need. One of the things that I did make the mistake about for Tennessee was at this point she was on pureed foods. And so I had bought all of her food in advance, and that put the bag at a very high weight. So I, told myself going forward, if we were to go back while she was still on purees, that I would just stop at the store and pick that stuff up after we got there, because that would have made the bag a lot lighter, and we wouldn't have had to deal with the overweight bags and fees and things like that that go along with that. Now, the second time that I flew with my daughter, again, 6-7 months old, she was a lot more alert. Lucky for me, I knew a lot of the flight attendants that were working that flight, so they were very compassionate. If I had to use the bathroom, they would hold the baby, which we will do. We'll help you out. If you're traveling by yourself and need to use the restroom, we can sit with kids. I always volunteer that to the moms that are on board. I always go up and tell them, like, hey, if you need to, you need a break, or you just, want to go to the bathroom or have a minute for yourself, like, I can hold the baby. It's not a problem. So I've always found that they are very grateful for that, because there are times where the baby's unsettleable and sometimes they just need to get up and walk around or whatever. My daughter was the same way. She was not liking the fact that she couldn't move around. She wanted to get up. She wanted to, crawl around. She wanted to be mobile. She didn't want to be sitting in that seat. So it is difficult as they get a little bit bigger to get them to stay in the seat, be comfortable, not be crying. But being a flight attendant and then also being a mom in those situations, you just kind of have to go with the flow and do what you can to control the baby. I will say that the ear popping thing, it's inevitable. Every child's going to feel that discomfort. My daughter, the first time going on a plane, did not have that discomfort. She actually slept like the entire time, which was great. But the second time, she definitely felt it more on landing than takeoff, but she definitely felt it. We had a little bit of irritability going through that part of it. But that's where, when you are getting ready to take off, you want to give the baby a bottle, something to suck on. That sucking motion will help clear their ears. And then likewise, when you start descending. So as soon as, I would say about 45 minutes prior to landing, flight attendants or the pilots will come on the PA system. They're going to tell you that we're beginning our initial descent. At that point, you want to get a bottle ready, and when you start feeling it, they're feeling it. So when your ears start popping, give the bottle to the baby. At least let them suck on something. If your baby likes pacifiers, that's another great option. My daughter does not like pacifiers. She wanted nothing to do with it. So I just always make sure that I have a bottle for her to suck on. And now she's on sippy cups. We haven't traveled since, we've switched. So at this point, it would just try to, again, be something where she's sucking something or swallowing. So even, giving them some food or something like that to chew and to swallow, that's what's going to keep those earways open. I really loved the Tennessee trip with my daughter. As struggle some as it was at points, being by myself trying to get through security with her, that was definitely a tiresome activity. However, again, knowing some of the flight attendants on board, I was able to, get her cockpit picture with the pilots, and she was amazed at all the lights and switches, and I couldn't even get her to look at the camera because she was in awe of the cockpit. But um, I definitely recommend that, as the kids get older, let them go up there and see it, get those memories, get those pictures. I can't wait to show that to my daughter when she's older. It's definitely a memorable thing for any child, and as she gets bigger too, where she realizes what it is, that'll be even more of a reason to go up and get those pictures with the kids. But just ask your flight attendants, ask the pilots, hey, is it cool if we take a picture? I will say that it's a lot easier during the boarding process to get them to say yes, because once we arrive at that gate, those pilots are gone. They run, they hide, they're on the next flight, they're running to catch their flight home. A lot of the times they're not even up there. So do it during boarding. That's about all I have as far as stories to answer Karen's questions. I don't really have a lot more to add to that. I am going to open this up with some polls at the end. If you guys have questions or comments, you can put them there. I don't mind covering that in the next podcast, so feel free to comment and definitely answer the poll questions at the bottom here once you're finished listening to this podcast. So at this point, we're going to kind of switch gears. I want to just talk about being a flight attendant. So not necessarily a parent or a pregnant flight attendant, but just flight attendant life in general. So most of you have probably seen, I did write a book called Skybound Dreams. It's a guide to becoming a flight attendant. It is available on Amazon. And if you're looking into a career as a flight attendant, a lot of the airlines are hiring right now. Some of them have put things on hold, so definitely research which ones are hiring before you start applying. But if you know somebody who works for the airline industry, specifically with the airline that you want to apply with, it would be great to speak with them. They can kind of put your resume towards the top by giving you a referral. A lot of airlines like that because if the person's a good employee, then they're going to want, their recommendations to also have, be hiring good employees. So that's something to consider, recommendation letters, that type of thing for people who already work for the airline that you want to apply with. So my guide, basically, it's very general. It doesn't cover any specific airline. It's just a general USA-based flight attendant manual kind of thing. Again, very basic, but it tells you, kind of what to expect through the process, what to expect for training, what to kind of prepare yourself for as far as questions go that they're going to want to talk to you about. And of course, these things are always changing, so this book might become obsolete at some point. But for right now, the general concept of the book, as far as crafting a good resume, what the airlines are looking for, what the qualifications are, all that is in this book. It's a great, easy, short read. I recommend it simply for people who are interested in becoming a flight attendant. It doesn't really go into the day-to-day life of a flight attendant so much. It's more about landing the job itself. So people have asked me that before, are you going to put out a book about what flight attendant life is about? And truly, I honestly think it would be better for me just to go on here and just give you guys a bunch of podcasts with flight attendant stories, because I could go on and on all day. But writing a book about it, I don't even know where I would start, because a lot of it's not going to even be funny until you actually hear somebody tell you the story. Speaking of stories, so this actually happened this morning. I was in the car driving home from taking my daughter to daycare, and the radio station was doing a segment on what are the dumbest questions that people ask you when you're at work. Now, if you're a flight attendant, you're listening to this, you are immediately already thinking exactly what I'm about to say, because it happens every single day when we're at work. So I had to call in. So I looked up the phone number and I called the radio station, and I was shocked when they actually answered, because I knew the voice right away, like the person that was on the radio. And they asked, they're like, okay, what's the question? I'm like, well, I'm a flight attendant, so I'm going to just tell you that the craziest, dumbest thing that we get asked almost on a daily basis is, how do I open the lavatory door? And every single time, it never ceases to amaze me that every single flight there is at least one person, if not more. And it drives me nuts. And so I had to call in. I told him that. The guy on the radio was laughing. He's like, well, isn't it self-explanatory? And I said, well, you would think so, but they still come on. And it's like, we have this saying in the airline industry where people lose 50% of their brain when they get to the airport, and another 25 when they're through security. So by the time they get to the aircraft, they have like 25% of their brain left. And a lot of them seriously come on board and they don't know how to open a lavatory door. And what's funny about it is it's still the same concept as a regular door. You twist and you pull. That's how you open a door. And it blows my mind that people will sit there, or they're trying to open like the ashtray part of the door. And I'm like, that's an ashtray. That's not a door handle. And it just blows my mind. And we laugh about it every time because it's every single flight there is somebody. And so the guy on the radio was laughing. The woman on the radio was laughing. It actually played live on the air. I posted on my Facebook today. And I just thought it was hilarious. And so I had to share that with you guys because it was epically hilarious. So I'm going to give you guys one last story that this happened recently to me as well, being at work, that I thought was funny. And I probably could have said this to them on the radio, but this isn't something that happens frequently, but it was definitely something that caught me off guard. Just when you think you've seen it all, okay? In 8 years, I've seen quite a bit. But the other day I was at work, and this passenger that was about 4 rows from the back where I was standing kind of waved me over, and she very seriously asked me, "Where's my parachute?" And I had to think to myself for a second, like, is she joking? Is she being serious? Now, this was probably, I don't know, a couple weeks after the incident with Alaska Airlines happened. And, Boeing was starting to go through all of their aircraft and, make sure that the maintenance and everything, so that they weren't going to have another blowout of the plane with those plug doors. And it was just funny, and it caught me off guard. So I had to ask her like 3 times, what did you say? What did you ask? What do you need? Because I just couldn't believe the question that she was asking me. Now, first of all, we do not have parachutes on an aircraft. We don't have them for the pilots, we don't have them for the flight attendants, and we certainly do not have them for the passengers. So I just kind of looked at her, and to myself, I thought, this is a dumb question, so I'm going to give her a dumb answer. So I very sweetly and professionally, but also very sarcastically said, "Ma'am, this is a Airbus, not a Boeing." She gave me a very confused look, and I said, "Yep, we don't have doors blow out on an Airbus. That's a Boeing thing." And I just walked away. And that's where we're going to end things with you guys here today. Thank you for listening to Wanderlust Hearts. This is Wanderlust Ren, and until next time, happy flying, happy reading.